All right, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Bethany Bennick. I am with the U.S. Department of Commerce International Trade Administration stationed here in Chicago, Illinois. I'm also the Deputy Global Team Leader of Water and Wastewater for our Environmental Technologies team. For those of you who might not be aware, the Department of Commerce is constantly advancing U.S. competitiveness across the world. So we are stationed in cities throughout the United States and abroad through our embassies and consulates to support U.S. companies that want to export their products and services, bid on foreign government contracts, and ultimately participate in global markets overseas. So we are here to have your best commercial interests at heart, and I'm delighted to have been asked to moderate today's panel. We'll try to keep it lively, casual. I know we're getting towards the end of the day, and we all probably have panel fatigue at this point. So with that in mind, I'm going to do a quick round robin of introductions of our panelists, and then we'll dive into some questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mohammed to introduce himself, title, who you're with, and then we'll circle back around to talk about some of the key priorities and initiatives.
Hi, good afternoon. We lost 2/3 of the room. So anyways, my name is Muhammad Ilahi. I'm Deputy Director with the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development. And I've been with the county about 7 years. I used to work for Mayor Daley back in the 90s in a similar capacity. In between, I was on the dark side in the investment banking. So here I am.
Hey everybody, Gavin Bowman with the City of Chicago Office of Climate and Environmental Equity. I mainly work on our building decarbonization policies and program management, and I'm helping to coordinate our strategy with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Kutska, Assistant Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Cook County. As of last week, I've been working in the Department of Environment and Sustainability, though, for the past 2 years, managing several different ARPA projects focused on sustainability.
Good afternoon. I'm James Jennings. I am the Deputy Director of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. I've been with the state of Illinois for 13 years, last 10 with IEPA. And my portfolio includes the totality of the agency's program areas, which is now evolving into both climate funding and climate change initiatives.
All right, and before we go back into a round robin of key initiatives and priorities for our panelists, I did want to bring some attention to something that may not be readily known or available to the public, but the president recently signed an executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And I'm delighted to report that we have nearly $106 billion in early stage projects that support global climate ambitions, representing about $27 billion in potential export opportunities. So this topic of conversation, especially related to climate and infrastructure, is very much at the top level of focus for this administration. It's being wrapped into the International Trade Administration's key priority initiatives as well. And as you can expect, there'll be plenty of opportunities for investment both at the local, regional, federal, and international level. So with that, back to Mohammed to discuss your key initiatives and priorities.
Sure. What did the county, I have to just take 30 seconds to talk about how our President Preckwinkle, Cook County Board President, when she came into power in 2011, before I guess it was hip for any government officials to say anything about this, she was in the forefront about bringing down the greenhouse gas emissions in Cook County. So, and actually created the Department of Environment. At that time, we didn't have it. And so the focus was obviously what can we do, look at the newest technologies, programs and all that, obviously don't try to reinvent the wheel, look at other counties, other jurisdictions, what they're doing. So we, that's a continuation of that. I come from finance background, so I'm always like, okay, you planners can plan all day, but somebody has to pay for it. So we created a program which started in California, and then kind of inching in towards the whole country eastward, called Commercial PACE, Property Access Clean Energy Program. It's a fantastic program in a way because a lot of time the building property owners, which is part of the big infrastructure, obviously, a lot of commercial properties, we have in this country, and and they're not able to or not even willing to do a lot of clean energy improvements in their building because of financial stress that they would go through. So this program basically finances 100% of their improvements, and that gets tacked into the property tax system. So they really don't have something like second mortgage where they are personally guaranteeing or the loan and all that. So it's a great program for property owners. We started Illinois started late. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a very good program. We do, and county started a couple of years ago. We launched our program, and that's helping the property owners, private property owners, basically with their clean energy improvement. I'm sure you all know of LEED certifications, right? So the private property owners has been doing it even before this kind of incentive. So now it even makes it better. So that's one program. I was going to throw in one program that with the ARPA money that Deb asked me to go ahead and throw it in. It's called Bright. Don't try to.
Businesses reducing impact on the environment.
There you go. It's from their department, and we're using ARPA money in a very good way. We're trying to help small businesses like dry cleaners and meat shops and some small manufacturing to make their properties energy efficient and all that. In return, they obviously have lower operating costs when they do that. So, but as you know, a lot of the small business owners don't have the capital to do it, and it needs capital for them to do that so they can reduce their operating costs. So that's a couple of programs that I'll stop now. So
Thanks, Mohammed. Over to you, Gavin.
I will not take as much time as probably deserved to go over all of the City of Chicago initiatives.
Right.
We would be here for a very long time. But I will talk about some of our the critical pieces of our strategy and what our commitments and plans are. So I think most notably, and I think the most important guiding principles that we have come from our 2022 climate action plan. So this represents the first update of our climate strategy since 2008. That document that was created in its inception was really incredible. I think it was a pioneering document in 2008 for municipal climate strategies. This 2022 version has updated that plan. It includes now more ambitious climate mitigation, adaptation, resiliency strategies, but really importantly, it is centering climate action on equitable impact and on a lens of equitable outcomes in climate action and resiliency planning broadly. We're really excited. We worked with thousands of community stakeholders to influence that plan. We did some really, really amazing kind of design charrette-esque sessions where we asked people to allocate a fictional budget to the priorities that they saw for the Chicago region. And it was really incredible, the response that we got, and helped influence what we actually put in the plan. And a really exciting document. I'd highly recommend folks checking it out. I would say that another really incredible complement to our plan is our Chicago Recovery Plan. This is our $188 million general obligation bond funded climate impact fund, for better or worse. This $188 million is spread across 16 high priority climate adaptation and mitigation projects throughout the city of Chicago. This money is the catalyst for our just transition, and it directly aligns with our climate action plan priorities. So, for example, the Chicago Recovery Plan is funding the single-family decarbonization program that we talked about on an earlier session. It's funding the expansion of our Green Alley program. It will go towards a multifamily decarbonization project, and the list goes on. Obviously, there are 16, and I'm not going to go into the details and everything, but very, very exciting. And then, yeah, I will leave it there because there's a lot of information that I think we're going to cover in the questions. But those two large pieces of our agenda, the plan and the strategies that we have in the climate action plan, which I'll call the CAP, and then the funding by which we're actually implementing projects to support that vision, are really kind of the bedrock of our strategy in the City of Chicago Office of Climate and Environmental Equity.
Thanks so much, Gavin. And now back to the county perspective with Deb.
Okay, so for the Cook County, we have two different ways to look at sustainability and climate work. There's our internal operations, things are within our control as a county, and then our external operations and programs and opportunities that we provide to our over 130 municipalities and the city of Chicago. So it's quite an extensive network. We are the second largest county in the country, so it's important not only to represent our residents well and to serve them, but also to help lead the way for other government entities and counties across the nation too. So internally, we have a clean energy plan. We have three major goals to that. One is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 45% from the 2010 baseline by 2030. And then, 100% renewable energy by 2030, and then net zero or carbon neutrality by 2050. So we are working towards those goals, and our colleague, Director Jacobs L is here. Her and her team have been phenomenal when it comes to facilities management, because as we know, you can have green building standards and practices and technology, but you need the people who are operating those systems and looking out for the mechanics and the equipment and the electronics that are in place to make sure that they're operating as they should be. And it's also identifying opportunities, again, within our operations and our control. What else can we do while we're already there? So that may be changing out water stations, or it can be planting trees at our courthouses. So there's a number of things within the county that we're really working to make sure that we are leading the way and walking the talk. And then I've been really focused for the past 2 years on our American Rescue Plan Act funding dollars. So we received $1 billion from the federal government to implement ARPA funds. And we went through a very intensive internal process through the county trying to align with our strategic plan. And we were very fortunate that a lot of our colleagues were open and interested in supporting sustainability initiatives. So we approved over $100 million of that funding for sustainability type projects. And that's everything for electric vehicle public access charging stations in charging deserts to healthy home retrofits, similar to some of the conversation we had earlier with the city of Chicago residential efforts to improve public health as well as reduce the impact on the environment. And then I've been working a lot with green stormwater infrastructure efforts and climate resiliency planning for our communities. So again, everything we're doing is twofold, is looking at how we do it and what's within our control, and then how we can better support our municipalities.
Wonderful, thanks. And back to the state of Illinois.
So at the state level, we're having to reevaluate just how we work. There's not or has not historically been a natural home for many of the programs that directly touch climate change and climate impacts, at least at the state level. And it's largely a function of the fact that we are designed around a model that in many respects mirrors the federal government. And so from the IEPA perspective, we almost exclusively for the past 50 years have directly mirrored our federal counterparts. And so what that's looked like has been implementing regulatory programs and their state derivatives. With this governor's office, that has changed profoundly. And so now we're in the process of both adding new programs that involve a totally different type of skill set and regulatory authority, like our oversight of the electric vehicle program statewide, and augmenting the overall charging network across the state and providing rebates for new vehicle purchases, to then just reevaluating how we examine some of our existing programs, like our stormwater infrastructure grant programs, and how we apply or how we go about enhancing the state drinking water infrastructure as a whole. Beyond that, we haven't historically been an agency that has been in the business of spending money. Outside of our very specific remediation programs and our SRF programs for water infrastructure, we haven't been in the business of actually engaging on infrastructure growth. That's changing and changing rapidly because of the amount of resources that are coming from the federal level. And so to that end, we're having to go through the exercise of building in climate considerations and life cycle analyses to how we go about spending federal money, and then where we ultimately long-term go with the existing state resources that are rapidly coming our way. And so it's really what we're having to do is apply a climate layer to the totality of our programs, which is both overdue but also really exciting given the opportunities that we have in front of us.
All right, so with that in mind, I heard a lot about collaboration across the city, county, state, and federal level. If you haven't noticed yet, this is a panel of public sector representatives. So to capitalize on that, I wanted to maybe highlight, we've heard a lot from the private sector today, but what role does the public sector play in climate-ready infrastructure that simply cannot be accomplished or addressed by the private sector? And maybe we'll just do a quick 1 or 2 responses here.
I would say, for example, I was talking about the commercial PACE program, and then a couple of things it does, and I know City of Chicago also is very much engaged in it, in the EV, charging, right? That has to come from the governmental sector to start. So aside from the ARPA money and all that we have, we can grant. This commercial PACE program also help building owners with the EV charging station. It could be upwards of like $150,000 for level 3, charging stations. Water conservation, which is a big item also. Resiliency, against flood, or if you're in California against earthquake, if you're in Florida against tornadoes, hurricanes and all that. So that obviously comes from the public sector. One thing that I know both city and us we also are focused on is the lead pipe, issue, which is a tremendous health hazard and probably has created generational problem, for mostly disadvantaged, communities and all that. So we're investing a lot of money in that, including the ARPA funds that we have received. So again, those are the public sector item that has to come to the forefront because, like I said, I was on the dark side. So private sector is not going to invest in that kind of stuff, which doesn't have the high returns.
And James?
Yeah, so building off of Mohammed's point, there are some exercises that are inherently rent sharing just because of the utility scale nature of them. So statewide, we are, depending on your survey, either the state with the most or second most lead service lines in the country. That, in conjunction with our stormwater infrastructure, represents a roughly $11.8 billion necessary investment to modernize statewide. The sheer scale of that is not something that would necessarily be conducive to exclusively private investment, which is where we come in through a combination of administering federal funds, but then also ensuring that state funds are appropriately allocated.
So moving on, I want to head back to the climate action plan for the city of Chicago. I am a new resident, just moved here in October, sight unseen, a very brave and bold move coming from the sunny Southwest. But I've been very impressed with Chicago, and I'm eager to hear a little bit more about the climate action plan and a little bit about the easy wins. What are the quick wins that we can celebrate here soon, and some of the long-term systemic changes that the plan hopes to address? I know we heard a little bit earlier in the presentation, but if you want to bite-size it down for us.
Yeah, I will do my best here. Again, a very comprehensive plan. It's very long. Would recommend everybody take the time to read it. It is wonderful. So our plan, in conjunction with Cook County's strategy and with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus strategy for the region, our plan calls for a 62% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. I will say that I'm not sure there are any easy wins. I think a lot of these battles are hard fought, and I will call them battles to achieve mitigation and adaptation. And when it comes to the climate crisis in Chicago, however, there are some near-term wins that I think we should celebrate. So I'll maybe scale it to time frame instead of like the easiest to accomplish. So the biggest announcement that we have is that we have recently signed the deal, a power purchase agreement in downstate Illinois to power all of the city's operations with renewable energy from I think it's the largest solar farm in Illinois, and that's going to happen in 2025. So that deal is signed, and the work is ongoing right now to deliver that project to the state of Illinois, generate that tax revenue that will support folks in Sangamon County, and then we'll also not directly, but it will power the operations of the city of Chicago, and we are one of the largest asset owners in the state, and certainly in the city proper. We own a massive amount of land and property, and this renewable energy is a catalyst for further development in the state. So I think that was a goal, that 2025 goal for municipal operations was built into the climate action plan, and it has been something that we've been able to achieve. Now, for the systemic change, there is a lot of that baked into the climate action plan, which is why it has a goal date of 2040, which is obviously not next year. It's not this decade. It is a while in the future, but within a reasonable time frame. We in the city of Chicago, so our emissions footprint is broken down into three major sectors. There's stationary energy, which is our buildings and the energy that they consume. There's transportation, and there is waste. That's kind of how we categorize things. I said this before, but for some folks who weren't in the room, buildings, stationary energy in the city of Chicago account for 69% of our total greenhouse gas footprint. This is a mammoth chunk of our footprint, and this is not kind of the case in many of our other peer cities because of there are a lot of factors why we have such a large footprint there, but this to me is the critical area where we need to intervene in order to draw down our emissions. And I will reflect back on a previous question that you had too. These programs to decarbonize our buildings require local government intervention in many ways. Some of this technology, like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, that isn't necessarily going to be adopted by the private sector organically as quickly as we need to in the city of Chicago. We are not California. We're not Oregon. We're not Washington State. We're not New York City. We have a very unique set of politics in Illinois and in the Midwest, and it requires intervention from us to move the ball forward and to catalyze momentum. But that sector, that 68% of emissions, is really, really, really critical for us to intervene. So that's why we have policies that are upcoming related to building decarbonization, why we have programs that we run at the city. And that's why we are investing so much money from our Chicago Recovery Plan to invest directly in the technologies and then in the kind of development that we need the private sector to also fund in the future. But we need to do those pilot projects to build the adequate workforce that is knowledgeable enough and has the skills to do that at a large scale. And this is, to me, the most important area that we need to intervene in. And we're doing it as quickly as we can. And again, focused on equitable outcomes so that we have, prevailing wage for the folks who will be doing the work on our behalf or on behalf of the folks who respond to our RFPs, and ensuring that folks who are returning residents, for example, are getting their fair shot in the just transition and making sure that they are benefiting from a transition to a clean economy when their communities have been so historically disinvested in. So that is all part of this strategy, and I think it represents the greatest systems change that we need to do and also the greatest opportunity for us.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Gavin. Deb, I want to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about some of your ARPA sustainability initiatives, specifically the Rain Ready Green Infrastructure Plan.
Yeah, so building on some of what we just heard here too, it's very important to us, of course, that we are putting equity in the middle, in the front, over the top of everything that we're doing, right? We know that with all of the funds that are coming and the programs that are happening, if these programs aren't planned appropriately and the money isn't implemented appropriately, then the same folks who've been left behind are going to be further behind. And so when we are creating systems, and even we're not quite there yet with making an announcement about an offsite renewable energy project, but very close to meet some of our goals, we also are considering things like workforce development and how to support local communities. So the Rain Ready plan is more focused on green infrastructure. So these are plans that were developed for 6 different communities in the Calumet corridor. And those communities had these plans developed through support from community block development grant funding several years ago, and each of the communities were at a different level of implementing said plans. We all know it's one thing to get money for a plan and to get the plans done, and then those plans often sit on shelves until you get the funding to actually implement them. So with some of our ARPA funds, we dedicated $6 million to these 6 communities to further implement their plans. And again, these are going to be community centered, so community members were involved in the planning themselves, but now we're going to have them involved in the prioritization as well. So we're working with the Center for Neighborhood Technology, and they're working with Greenprint Partners, and they have steering committees in each of the 6 different communities where we're working of residents to come together to talk about the plans. What are their needs? What are they seeing? What can we do to implement change directly in their neighborhoods to make sure that they're not suffering from the continued flooding that causes illness, lost time from work, damage to their homes and their businesses. So it's all efforts to support nature-based solutions. and that can vary depending on the community, right? So it may be distributing rain barrels to some neighborhoods, it may be putting green alleys in others, it may be lots of tree planting, but it's going to depend on what the community is specifically asking for. And we're very lucky to have an amazing network in this area for green stormwater infrastructure. My colleagues at MWRD are going to be talking to you soon. We talk a lot with them. We work with our Department of Transportation and Highways within the county. We work with our Bureau of Asset Management within the county, our Department of Emergency Management. And that's another piece, is really focusing on resilience for all of these efforts that we're doing. If we're in there, we really need to be talking about how to set communities up to thrive as the climate continues to change. And that's a huge focus for emergency response and management. So we've been making a concerted effort at the county to connect our efforts to ensure that any projects that are being funded while we're in there, that we're also addressing these climate resiliency matters at the same time.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. Before I go back to Mohammed, I'm going to ask James really quickly. I know you specialize in waste reduction compliance. Can you maybe highlight a completed project that you've worked on at the state level that has directly addressed the waste reduction compliance?
So completed is a difficult word. So, Illinois is somewhat unique in that, unlike many other states, our waste and recycling infrastructure is almost exclusively localized, and that was based on a series of policy decisions made in the 1980s that have been largely carried through. One of the elements that the agency has been very recently able to get our arms around is the reality that while this policy decision in the 80s made sense, it was tied to an assumption that there would be state resources available to communities that wouldn't otherwise have the ability to effectively evaluate the long-term impacts of their materials management strategies. One of the components that the agency spent a lot of time on, particularly during COVID, was chairing a statewide committee that was tasked with, among other things, identifying processes that could be developed and funding opportunities where existing state resources could be dedicated to county and local governments to allow them to evaluate their planning needs, rework their plans as needed, and where appropriate, identify climate-driven opportunities to help re-examine how they're actually going about recycling. Over the past 2 years, we've issued almost $1 million in local awards, during which time 101 of the 102 counties have been able to revisit their solid waste and recycling plans, each of which with an eye toward developing processes that target materials that will, when diverted, maximize their greenhouse gas impacts. That was something that has had a wide range of positive effects, chief among them being that we've been able to connect some units of local government that maybe politically weren't as inclined to examine climate change in this area with other areas of the state to help identify some of those commonalities. And the net effect has been a statewide plan that is much more well developed and reflects the existing needs of the state that historically just had not existed. So it's complete in that it has been actually developed, and we've seen relatively universal acceptance. Now comes the difficult part in actually carrying out some of the deliverables that were identified in those 101 plans.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, James. Mohammed, back to you. I know you had mentioned California earlier as a potential source of inspiration. Can you maybe highlight some best practices you've seen from other counties, or perhaps even Cook County itself, in terms of climate resiliency?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was going to say that Deb talked about CDBG, we use our CDBG dollars, even though we're second largest county compared to city of Chicago, we are like 1/10 of allocation that we have from the federal government. One of the programs that again goes back to the disadvantaged communities. You go to North Shore in Chicago's North Shore side, you see all these LED lights popping up all over in the streets and all that. We use our CDBG dollars effectively in the South Suburban Cook County, which is less fortunate areas for the government and the income and that they have, to turn few of the communities street light into LED lights and all that. So that's a part of infrastructure that we try to help. We have a program, Department of Transportation and Highways is not represented here, I think, but it's called Invest in Cook, and that we get about around plus minus $8 million a year in motor fuel taxes from the state we use that again very effectively for the infrastructure need for these communities, with emphasis on you know cleaner and greener infrastructure, basically. That and every year we get 5 times the application, and we're only able to give 20% of what are the requests are. So those are the couple of winners, I guess, I can think of. As far as yeah, you're right. California, I mean, starts everything, and then everybody starts seeing what's going on. And when I met the person who single-handedly thought about the commercial PACE program, that how it should be a governmental program where when you make this improvement in your properties, how it has to be extremely friendly for the property owners and all that. So it stay this improvement stays with the property, so the loan should stay with the property, right? So one person thought about it and went to Berkeley, and Berkeley said, okay, we'll do it. And that's now we have 39 states enacted the program, plus city of DC. So those are the things that we obviously take part in national conferences, in the county and city conferences and all that. We learn from each other what they're doing, and especially given I'm coughing a little bit. I was in the Armageddon last week in New York City for 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday. If you guys seen the pictures, well, I experienced it. Our New York City's air quality index number, we were watching, everybody in the conference watching on the phone, we're like 100 points over the second lowest in the world. So it was so horrible. They said, like, if you inhale that for 30 minutes, you'll permanently damage your lungs. So anyways, so I hope I didn't do mine. That's why I'm coughing. But these are the things that we have to learn from each other, right? And who knew Canada would be burning, right? And Canada is burning. So.
And this is a question out of personal interest. What climate reality is Cook County best prepared to address and perhaps worst prepared to address?
I think given the how we're allocating ARPA, yeah, we have $1 billion, and by the way, Deb, our department got about 40% of it to do the program. So we are best prepared for this one time, cash coming in, and really not only internal. We actually took advice from the external stakeholders also, that how to implement that. So I would say best prepared Cook County right now. I have to say the governance. The governance in the county under Tony Preckwinkle she's dead serious about public service, good for the citizens and all that. So that I have seen in the last 7 years, any problem comes in, how she tackles it, and really we hardly sweat, once we're done with it. Worse, I don't know. I really can't tell. If something like that happens, this whole burning issue, right? I mean, we have seen California has been burning for years. Now Canada, and things like, we have our forest preserve district in Cook County is the largest in the country with 70,000 plus acres. I just don't want to say anything. Hope nothing happens. So then maybe we're not prepared for that. So.
I would say, adding on, for us, flooding is the number one thing that our residents talk to us about. And when we did the open stakeholder conversations about how to spend ARPA funds, our residents may not be talking about climate, but they're talking about flooding. And so I feel like we're right there at being able to really comprehensively help, again, because we have such a nice network here, and because we're starting to think about how we can collaboratively approach all of these projects, that if we're digging up roads, that we might as well add green infrastructure while we're doing it, and add bioswales to these parking lots and everything else. But I will say, like, that's, to me, the number one pressing issue that our communities are facing. And again, the communities are Black and brown communities in the southern parts of Cook County especially, that have large amounts of impervious surfaces, that have low tree canopy, and that don't have the available funds in the municipal banks to be able to support the investment off the bat. Those are the communities that we need to step in and help, so that they're not, again, literally washed away when these floods come.
So with that, we're going to wrap up our panel with just some quick key takeaway thoughts. as you address all of these really important issues and initiatives that you've taken on, I wanted to maybe bring it back down to if you could say one thing to the public of the the constituents that you serve, what would it be around climate and infrastructure? Lead pipes are bad. Don't go into a garden unit. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. So maybe my response would be a bit of a derivative from your last one, is that there needs to be an understanding that there is the public ambition to meet the moment. I mean, I think that all of us would recognize this is not even a generational issue, but a polygenerational issue. And so to that end, there is ambition within various levels of government and the resources there to support the needed action. One of the things that I would really want to impress upon the constituents that we deal with is that there has to be an understanding that the bevy of information that's going to be available should not be just read in a vacuum, or shouldn't be read through a maybe small p political lens. And so one of the things that we have encountered is that there's now a series of expanding think pieces on the life cycle analysis for electric vehicles. Those are going to continue to populate, and there may be some basis to say that in a narrow spectrum, internal combustion vehicles have a better life expectancy than electric vehicles. That should not, though, be a brick to continued progress. And so it's important for people to be able to put those data into context. And that's something that I know as a state we really struggle with because of the whiplash nature of people wanting to react to individual pieces of information that may tie to a predisposition.
Thanks, James. Deb?
I guess I would say we're trying. I want residents to know that recognizing that there are generations of disinvestment and that there are decades of distrust with government, and that we have so many families who are still dealing with the effects of redlining in our communities. I mean, you can name the number of issues, but that we are working on it from the inside for what we can do, at least at Cook County, from the government. There are people here who care, who really want to serve and to help meet your needs. And so I would say that that's my number one thing. Like, we are trying and we're working within our limitations, but we really want to get people what they need to be successful and be well.
And to that end, there's plenty of avenues to express your needs and desires as well, it sounds like. Gavin?
I'll go very quickly. I think we're out of time. I would want to impress on folks that climate issues can seem very ivory tower, and they can seem like they won't impact the individual very much. It is very academic and it's very heady, the climate crisis, and it seems abstract to most people. I would want to impress on folks that the climate crisis is intersectional in every issue that folks are facing, especially folks who have been disenfranchised in the political process and have been underinvested in. And, when we talk about climate action, we're talking about lowering your utility bills. When we're talking about climate action, we're talking about ensuring that you have air conditioning in your home when you didn't have it before. This is about comfort, livability, and it is about ensuring long-term wealth building for folks who have not had access to that for a very long time. And I'm just going to pair this with something really quickly. I would want to tell people that acting on climate doesn't mean you need to detract something from your life or lose anything. The Inflation Reduction Act has offered us a one-time opportunity, an incredible opportunity to utilize new technology, buy new electric vehicles that are heavily subsidized, and help folks not only reduce their carbon emissions, but also save money at the end of the day. We can act on climate. It can impact your pocketbook, and we can all make a difference by leveraging all of these resources and tools that are out there.
Mohammed, take us home.
Well, I like to say that a little bit colorful, that if I worry about myself, it's a singular issue that I'm talking about. If I worry, concerned about you and everybody else, others, that means I am actually going to make an impact on everybody's thought process. Since I was 12 years old, my friends gave me a title, Mr. Know-It-All. So I came here when I was 20 years old in college, and last 42 years I've been an astute observer of what's been going on, in every sector. And I tell you this, we all need to wake up. We all need to wake up, be serious about many things. I mean, I was listening to high-speed rail issue and all that. I know exactly why high-speed rail doesn't happen here. Even though it's happening somewhere else for 50 years. There are so many things. It's the politics of it, the politicians, I would say, of it, and how we just, we just let them a free, pass to conduct the way they do. We all need to wake up and get our megaphone out and demand to be governed better. So.
And with that, that concludes our session. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists.